Coming up this week on the GCN Racing News Show, could the cycling calendar be changed forever? We discuss if this period of inactivity could be an opportunity to change things for the better. We've also got a roundup of the most impressive pro rider Strava rides from the last week and all the other race-related news as well. Now, this week we also have news of another new UCI Calendar proposal for men's road racing. It was reported by the Belgian broadcaster RTBF that the following dates for the major races had actually been sent by the UCI out to the relevant teams. Now, as the UCI have already announced, the plan is to start the Tour de France on August the 29th. Its final day on September the 20th will overlap with the first day of the World Championships, which will conclude 1 week later with the men's road race. However, with the remainder of the big races, there are plenty of differences here from the dates that were proposed by L'Equipe and Het Nieuwsblad, which we talked about, of course, on last week's GCN Racing News Show. In this particular version of the calendar, anyone wishing to ride the Giro d'Italia won't be able to ride Amstel Gold, Liège-Bastogne-Liège, or any of the cobbled classics. It does extend the season out a lot further into November, and it also resumes the season a lot earlier, with a very optimistic date of August the 1st set for Strada Bianca. Without wanting to repeat our sentiments of last week, it is tremendously exciting to consider all of these races coming thick and fast at the end of the year. But with that excitement comes plenty of trepidation, as we still have no idea what measures will still be in place to deal with coronavirus in all of the various European countries where those races take place. All of these new calendar proposals are plans which don't really seem to impress the French sports minister, Roxana Maracineanu, who has let it be known that the Tour de France and sport in general will not be a priority in French society. She added that if the Tour de France is not possible this year, it will not be the end of the world. Now, those comments seem to flabbergast Groupama FDJ team manager Marc Madiot. Never one to shy away from his gasp being flabbered, he responded to the French sports minister by saying her comment was misjudged and that if the Tour does not go ahead, it's excessively serious. There's a whole ecosystem that revolves around it and which does not function without the source of income. The French Cycling Federation appeared to be just as bullish as Madiot himself, calling for riding outdoors to be allowed from May the 11th, which is when the current set of restrictions are due to be ended in France. This would certainly give riders planning to take part in the first of those rearranged races plenty of time to get out on the roads and get some training done. But again, it remains to be seen how that marries up with the French government's view on the coronavirus situation. The UCI are due to hold a meeting this coming Wednesday with race organisers, teams and the Riders Association to discuss the proposed racing calendar a bit more. All of this concerns cycling future in the short term and whether we'll see any racing before the end of the year or not. But what about the longer term future? Now that the cycling calendar has been adjusted beyond all recognition, perhaps there is a unique opportunity here to make more long-term adjustments for the benefit of the sport in general. Now, it has often been mooted that the current traditional cycling calendar is somewhat convoluted, overcrowded, too complicated for an average fan to comprehend and in need of some modernisation. So, could this be the opportunity for the UCI to simplify it? Now, some say that to take the sport forward, to grow it, we need a calendar in which we see the best riders compete against each other on a regular basis, and not just at a couple of events per year. There was an interesting series of articles produced this time last year, in fact, by RAFA. It was called the RAFA Roadmap. In them, a whole host of changes to professional cycling were suggested, including an overhaul of the calendar. However, they also suggested that the sequencing of races in the cycling calendar is as unmoving as the mountains tackled by the racers. But as we've seen this year, they're not so unmovable after all. Not under the circumstances any of us would have wanted or predicted, but they've all just been moved. So perhaps it's now time to ponder why the Tour de France is in July. Shouldn't the centrepiece of the sport act as the finale to the whole season? A bit like the Champions League final or the Super Bowl in American football. We also saw temperatures in France reach the mid-40 degrees Celsius last July, and presumably with climate change that will only become more regular. And with the UCI extreme weather protocol now being enforced, is July really the best month to be racing around France? The opposite, in fact, could be said of the Giro d'Italia in May. There's often snow that affects the high mountains there, where stages need to be either cancelled or shortened quite regularly. Is May the best month for the Giro? And what about grouping the monuments more coherently so that Il Lombardia isn't hanging around on its own 6 months after the other monuments? Now, if I'm going to be completely honest with all of you here, I actually love the racing calendar just the way it is. From the start in January at the Tour Down Under, to the early season European stage races, to the bigger ones like Paris-Nice and Tirreno Adriatico, and then on to the one-day classics, cobbled and then hilly, then the Giro d'Italia, then the Tour de France warm-up races, then the Tour, the Vuelta, the World Championships, and then the final one-day races and Monument. Plus a whole load of other races thrown in the mix for good measure. Yes, it may take a while to get your head around, but once you do, it makes perfect sense, or it does at least to me, but then I am just a few years away now from being middle-aged. How about you there at home? Do you think that this current cycling calendar could do with a big shake-up? You can let us know your thoughts and comments on this in the comment section just below this video. Now, last week we asked you in our poll if you thought that there would be any more pro racing in 2020. 65% of you voted yes. Now that's the kind of optimism I like to see. We need something to look forward to, don't we? Fingers crossed it can happen in some way, shape or form later on this year. Now on to this week's poll. It's a hot or not. Now if you missed it on the GCN show last week, we have got a brand new GCN kit and it's provided by our new partner Castelli. There is the design behind me, and here now on the screen you can see it in a professional photo. What do you reckon? We're over the moon with it, but you can let us know your thoughts over on the GCN app. Now bear in mind when you're voting on the new kit, and hot or not, it is the kit you're voting on and not the model in it. In other news, unfortunately the future of the Bigla Katusha Pro Cycling team is in jeopardy. The team took to social media late last week to say that their main sponsor, Bigla, wants to withdraw most of its funding and that Katusha stopped paying at the start of this month. Now this is the first major pro cycling fallout from the global economic crisis that's arisen from the coronavirus pandemic. Lizzie Banks took to social media herself though to praise the way the management team have handled the whole situation and to say that all of the riders' salary payments are up to date. Here's hoping that the team is able to find a way to continue this year and into next. In fact, the team have said to me that a campaign will be starting shortly to save the team. Now, if the news on that comes out before this racing news show is released, we will make sure we put a link to it in the description just below, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Now, despite all the indoor riding that we're seeing at the moment from the pros, some of them are continuing to train outside, where allowed, and they're putting in some very impressive rides. We're going to start with Wout van Aert, who last Wednesday rode 286 kilometres from home, past Liège and back, on a ride that he named El Clasico Hertals Bano Hertals. 9 hours in total on the bike with an average speed of 32.5 kilometres per hour, over 20 miles per hour. Although there was only 2,000 metres of climbing and he didn't take a single KOM, so he could have done a lot better. I'm only joking, wow, that's a serious ride right there. Compatriot Lawrence Narsson didn't quite ride as far, only 258 kilometres, but he also took 9 hours to do it. Reason being, he did over double the elevation gain as Wout, and he completed the entire route of Liège-Bastogne-Liège that should have taken place on Sunday. Trumping both of them though was Marcus Burkhardt of Bora Hansgrohe. He rode a whopping 350 kilometres in southeast Germany, 10 hours and 40 minutes in the saddle, an average speed of over 32 kilometres per hour and a very low average heart rate of 121 beats per minute. A long recovery ride then. Lawrence's brother, Oliver Narsson, is back on Strava too, and it looks as though he's been experimenting with a bit of Strava art. Not exactly sure what that is, but it looks like something, doesn't it? I also had to share with you Andre Greipel's Strava file from stage 4 of the Digital Tour de Suisse. Now this was indoors, but he did 424 watts for almost 50 minutes. Now, I know he's a bit heavier than your average pro cyclist. I could fit 2 of my calf muscles into one of his, but that is some serious power and proof, if you need it, that you have to be blooming fit to get to those sprint finishes in the first place. His teammate at the Israel Startup Nation and another sprinter, Hugo Hofstetter, completed an Everesting on Saturday, going up the Alpe de Zwift 9 times, whilst Freddie Ovett went one better with 10 ascents and a total of 10,000 metres of climbing. This period of no racing really is making pro riders challenge themselves, isn't it? Incidentally, virtual racing isn't going down well with all pros at the moment. Now obviously they'd all much rather be racing out on the roads themselves, but it does appear that some have taken a shine to it a little more than others. Tom Dumoulin of Jumbo-Visma was talking last week to his local newspaper De Limburgen, and he said that he's not a huge fan of e-racing and that there are too many possible inaccuracies and variances with different indoor training power meters. Previous to that, Sagan has described himself as a real racer and not a virtual one, and Alejandro Valverde of Movistar has also been quite dismissive of the modern format. That said, he's even older than I am, so he's probably never got over the mind-numbing boredom of riding non-smart trainers with nothing but a clock and the pain in your legs to concentrate on. Right, that is all for now. I will be back tomorrow with Si discussing whether the coronavirus could be the best thing that's ever happened to cycling as a recreation and as a means of transport. I will see you then for the GCN show. Bye for now.